Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Continuing taking a look at next week's slate, and we're going down to the SEC as the Florida Gators head on the road to play South Carolina, two teams that I've loved to talk about, not necessarily because they're the best teams in the SEC in 2023, but the future for both of these programs, I think, is extremely bright. You look at South Carolina and where Coach Beamer has the culture of this program on the recruiting trail, has this program, it's going in the right direction. Florida, very, very similar. Billy Napier recruiting his tail off. You're having a lot of young guys play some really, really good football for both of these programs. A massive game in terms of getting to that bowl eligibility, but more importantly, some momentum for these programs going into the future. Before we get into this game, just want to say thank you to you guys. The support you guys have shown the boys for all these game breakdowns truly does mean a lot. So if you enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, but more importantly, would love to hear from you guys. Best part about doing this, learning from you guys, chopping it up with you guys in the comment section. So let me know your picks, predictions, players that you're going to be watching. And without further ado, let's get into this. And I want to start with Florida on the offensive side of the ball, because you go back to that Vanderbilt game on Saturday, that's exactly what you want to see from Florida. I get it's Vanderbilt, but they did exactly what you expected them to do. They ran the football extremely well. Montrell Johnson, Trayon Webb combining for over 200 yards on the ground. And you see, when this Florida team can run the football like they were able to against Tennessee, that's when this offense is most dangerous. Like, this is not going to be the most explosive offense that you see in the country. That being said, when they run the football at a high level, it takes pressure off of Graham Mertz. You can work that play action in, and that's when Graham Mertz is most comfortable. And kind of evaluating Graham Mertz and how he's been, a lot of haters in the beginning of the season saying he couldn't figure it out at Wisconsin. He's not going to be a good SEC quarterback. Graham Mertz has completed 80% of his balls for almost 1,500 yards, 9 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. This is exactly what Billy Napier wanted from Graham Mertz. I think Graham Mertz has been relatively solid for the Florida Gators. But what's most important that I got from Florida against Vanderbilt, and I owe an apology to that tight end room, Arlis Bordenham. I've been critical about not having the playmakers at that tight end position, a position that they want to go a lot of 12 personnel and use those tight ends. They haven't been good. Arlis Bordenham telling me to shove it. Like, he was phenomenal. And this wasn't just like a game script that he had a few touches. He looked really, really good. 7 catches, 99 yards, 2 touchdowns. Really, really tough after the catch. Having a tight end like Arlis Bordenham, and if he can play kind of that level of football the rest of the way, having a tight end who's dangerous in that passing attack, going to be absolutely massive for the Florida Gators. Second, Eugene Wilson coming back. We kind of been talking about who's the guy in this Florida wide receiving room to give the Gators the spark. Ricky Pearsall is that wide receiver one, but who's the guy who's the playmaker where like the defense has to hold their breath every time he touches the football? That's Eugene Wilson. And when he's on the field getting his touches, that's the type of impact he has on this Florida offense. Overall, I thought Billy Napier, again, still needs to hire an offensive coordinator in the offseason, but I thought he called probably the best offense that we've seen from the Florida Gators all year. Now, flipping sides, taking a look at this South Carolina defense, it has to do with stopping the run, right? When you see Florida struggle against Utah, against Kentucky, they couldn't get anything going on the ground. If South Carolina wants to slow this Florida Gators team down and win the football game, it starts with winning on first and second down, stopping the run, and forcing this Florida Gators team into those obvious passing situations where they're just clearly not as good. That's not how that offense is designed to run. Florida or South Carolina, I think, made some improvements up front, but still allowing 4.3 yards per rush. That's 75th in the country. That's the battle of this game. When you're handicapped and trying to predict this game, if South Carolina can stop this Florida Gators rushing attack, you feel pretty good about South Carolina and their chances to win this game. Now, the struggles for South Carolina stopping the run, I don't think's been on the defensive line. Guys like Sanders, Hemingway, Hundley, I think those dudes have been pretty good for South Carolina. My bigger critique is the linebacker play. Like, I look at a guy, and I don't love to put dudes on blast, but Stone Blanton just not playing his best football. And then you go look at the numbers, a 23% missed tackle rate. These linebackers have to tackle better in space. They have to fit their run gaps a little bit better. I wouldn't mind seeing Pup Howard a little bit, the true freshman. I think he's been one of the better linebackers for South Carolina in his limited reps. this is going to be a big game for the linebackers, right? And if you can stop the run and these linebackers play good, again, you're feeling pretty good about beating the Florida Gators. Now in the back end, this is a talented secondary that just quite frankly hasn't played up to their style, their level, right? Mississippi State absolutely tore them apart in the back end. I know they've had some injuries back there, but this is a group that if you can stop the run and force Florida in those obvious passing situations, this South Carolina secondary needs to play up to their potential. And if they do, like you're feeling good about South Carolina. Now flipping the side, looking at this South Carolina offense, I've been the biggest Spencer Rattler fan that you've seen in the country. Spencer Rattler has been so good, and it doesn't show up on the box score. And if you don't watch the South Carolina games, you don't see that. Spencer Rattler has been phenomenal. The biggest storyline for this South Carolina offense is getting the run game going and protecting Spencer Rattler. This offensive line just has not been good enough. You see the amount of quarterback sacks and the quarterback hurries. Spencer Rattler is getting sacked on almost 15% of his dropbacks, and that number would be more if Spencer Rattler wasn't being a superhuman sometimes in the pocket. This offensive line needs to get better, and they need to start running the football a little bit more. Because when you can't run the football, these guys are coming off the edge on the opposing defense. They're just pinning the ears back. Now, I do think they found a little something with Mario Anderson. They were searching for all sorts of answers at that running back position. The Corian Joyner moving him over from wide receiver to running back. Juju McDowell. Mario Anderson has given them that true running back kind of play that can give you 4 or 5 hard yards. He runs the ball extremely hard. That's what I'm looking at. And then you got to talk about Xavier Legette. If Florida wants to try to shut down this South Carolina offense, making sure Xavier Legette does not get loose down the field, working after the guy. I think Xavier Legette is playing himself in, and I know this is crazy, and I have to get back into the film to kind of evaluate this. But from what I've seen, like that's a top 50 NFL draft pick. Like the size, the ball skills that he plays with, his ability to go after the catch, how fast he is working. We need to combine the size, speed, and the athletic ability of a guy like Xavier Legette. That is a special wide receiver, and he has put it all together for the Gamecocks. Florida needs to make sure that they have their eyes on Xavier Legette. Now transitioning to that Florida Gators defense, Jason Marshall needs to be better. Like you're going to be working. I wouldn't be surprised if you see Jason Marshall on Xavier Legette. This is their best guy in the secondary who just has not played like their best guy. Xavier Legette, Jason Marshall, that battle is going to be absolutely key in this game. The second thing I'm looking for, the Florida Gators got to get that pass rush going, especially with their front four. Now, Princely U, he's been phenomenal, like 23% pass rush win rate, 15 quarterback hurries. Now, that doesn't always show up on the stat sheet, only 2 sacks on the year, I believe, but he's been dominant, and the film backs that up. Who else is going to be stepping up in that pass rush, right? Because outside of Princely U, it hasn't necessarily been great. Here's a little stat. I was doing some prep for this game. The number 2 player on the Florida Gators defensive line in terms of quarterback hurries, true freshman Kelby Collins. Would not be surprised if you see a little bit more of him, because that if you're trying to stop this South Carolina offense, it is getting after the quarterback and forcing this offensive line to pass protect. Wouldn't be surprised if we see a little bit more Kelby Collins, who's a guy that is certainly kind of coming into that role for the Florida Gators on the offensive side of the ball. If Florida can get after the passer, like that's the story of this game. They only have a 4% sack rate on the defensive side of the ball. That's not even inside the top 100. If they can get that going, because I feel like the quarterback hurries are coming. Like they're winning up front. They just got to make sure they finish these plays and kind of finish these sacks off. That's probably the key to this game. And I wouldn't be surprised if Austin Armstrong is going to challenge this South Carolina offensive line to pick up some of these blitz packages that he really does a nice job disguising. At the end of the day, I want to see this Austin Armstrong Florida Gators defense take it to South Carolina up front. That's probably the key to the game when you're looking at this South Carolina offense going up against the Florida Gators team. Now, getting to the pick, this pick has my brain in a pretzel here, right? Florida heading on the road, 2.5-point dogs. It's going to be rocking. It's a really big game for both of these programs in terms of making a bowl game and kind of keeping that momentum going into next year. Slight lean to the Florida Gators because I like this South Carolina team, but I think Florida's going to be able to establish the run. And when they can run the football, that offense looks a hell of a lot better. And then on the flip side, I love Spencer Rattler. I think he's playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the entire country, even though it doesn't necessarily show up on the stat sheet. this offensive line, unless they've gotten meaningfully better coming off this off week, it's such a problem. And I think Florida, Austin Armstrong is going to be able to capitalize on it. Give me the Florida Gators here, getting pressure on Spencer Rattler, going on the road. I don't like picking the Florida Gators on the road. Billy Napier has not given us much of a reason to like the Gators on the road. That being said, I think they have a good chance at bucking that trend. This is going to be a really, really good game. Definitely not confident in a pick here. It's going to be a fun one. Two programs that I'm massive fans of. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and I'll talk to y'all later.